I'm still trying to make sense of everything that's happened even now. Even though it happened 3 years ago, I'm still coming to terms with it. At the time, I was 60 years old, and I was living in Edmonton, where I'd spent most of my adult life just working at the same company and doing whatever it is that I was doing. I'd been single for quite a long time at that point. Wasn't looking for anyone, and I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I was just focused on making it to retirement, with enough money to finally enjoy myself. But when I think back to that first message I got on that dating site, I can't believe how a simple "hello, handsome" turned into me sending over $100,000 to someone I'd never even met in person. I never saw myself as the kind of man who would wire money halfway around the world to a stranger. I was careful, practical, always the one telling other people to watch out for scams. But it turns out even the most cautious people can get swept into something they don't understand. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't even desperate. But I had $135,000 saved up and thought that would be enough to give me a comfortable retirement after years of grinding away in a job I never really loved. I was 60 when I finally decided I'd had enough of the cold. I'd spent 42 years in Edmonton, just working the same job in construction management, coming home to an empty house, watching the Oilers lose, and doing it all over again the next day. I felt like I was pretty boring, really. Nothing exciting ever happened to me. I wasn't the type to take risks or do anything spontaneous. I had $135,000 saved up, although it wasn't a fortune, but I felt pretty good about the future. I'd worked for decades at the same company, put away what I could and kept my expenses low. My house was paid off, and I'd sold it for a decent amount before all this started. I had my government pension coming in a few years, and between that and my savings, I figured I could stretch it out if I was smart. I got married back in 1989. We went on to have 2 kids. My marriage was okay for a while, nothing special, but we made it work. She wanted more than I could give her, always complaining about the house, the car, the vacations we couldn't afford. By 2008, she'd had enough and filed for divorce. She didn't get half my retirement, thank God, but she got the house we'd been living in, and I had to start over at 53. By the time 2019 came around, I was 60 and completely alone. I'd heard people talk about the Philippines, how the cost of living was lower, how life could be easier, and how a man could start fresh. I'd seen videos online, read forum posts, heard stories from guys at work who'd been there on vacation. I let myself believe it because I wanted something like that to be true so badly. I wanted to matter to someone. I wanted to feel like I wasn't just running out the clock. By the time I turned 60, I started thinking, why was I even staying there? The winters were brutal. I had no family that cared, and I had enough saved to make a real go of it somewhere warm. I could live there on the money I had. I could have a nice place, a nice girlfriend, and I could be respected for once instead of just being another old guy nobody noticed. I joined a dating site in the Philippines. I forgot what the name of it was, but it was clear that there were more girls on there than guys, and it was quite interesting to receive messages from girls in their early 20s saying they wanted a serious relationship with someone just like me. I got it, that they came from a poor background and needed financial support. I get they wanted a better life, but I wanted a better life as well. And by being with someone like that, I thought I would have a better life. Before long, I started talking to one girl who was from Pampanga. She was only 28 years old, but it was as if she completely looked past my age and appearance and looked at who I was inside as a person. Her name was Christina. She had this profile picture that just stopped me in my tracks. Dark hair, beautiful smile, and these eyes that looked right through the camera like she was looking at you personally. Her profile said she was looking for something serious, someone mature, someone who knew what he wanted in life. We started chatting on the site first, then moved to WhatsApp pretty quickly. She'd message me good morning every single day, ask how I slept, what I was doing, if I'd eaten yet. She told me about her life in Angeles City, how she worked at a call center, how she was sending money back to her family in the province, how hard everything was, but she was trying her best. She'd send me pictures. Nothing inappropriate at first, just selfies from work, pictures of her food, screenshots of songs she was listening to. She told me I seemed different from other foreign men she'd talked to. She said I seemed genuine, kind, like someone she could trust. Within 2 weeks, we were video calling every night. She'd be in her small apartment, and I'd be in my living room in Edmonton, and for those couple hours I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. She'd laugh at my jokes, ask about my day, tell me she wished I was there with her. It only took me 3 weeks to decide I wanted to meet her in person. But that's when things got complicated. About a month into talking, Christina told me her landlord was raising her rent, and she was panicking because she didn't have enough to cover it. She said she'd been helping her mother with medical bills and didn't have anything left. She wasn't asking me for money directly, but she was clearly stressed about it. I asked how much she needed. She said 20,000 pesos, which I looked up and realized was only about 500 Canadian dollars. It didn't seem like much to me, especially if it meant she wouldn't be stressed and we could keep talking without that hanging over her. I sent it through Western Union. She was so grateful, sent me a long voice message crying and thanking me, saying she'd never met anyone as kind as me, that she couldn't believe someone would help her like that. When I told my daughter about Christina a few weeks later, mentioned that I was talking to someone in the Philippines and she was younger than her, I could hear her sigh as if to say, "Here we go." She asked if I'd sent her money yet. I lied and said no. But I didn't care what she thought. Life was great for the first time in years. Part of me knew what the game was in the Philippines. I'd read enough forum posts, seen enough YouTube videos. And part of me had already come to the conclusion that she probably needed money more than she needed me. But I chose to ignore it. I told myself this was different. She was different. We had a real connection. For the first 2 months, everything was perfect. We video called every single day. I found myself rushing home from work just so I wouldn't miss our scheduled call time. She'd be waiting for me, already smiling when the call connected, asking about my day like she genuinely cared. I'd never experienced anything like it. My ex-wife hadn't asked me how my day was in probably the last 10 years of our marriage. But here was this beautiful young woman, halfway around the world, who seemed to hang on every word I said. After dating for 3 months, that's when she first mentioned me visiting. She said she wanted to meet me in person, wanted to show me around Angeles, introduce me to her friends, take me to her favorite places. The way she talked about it made it sound so natural, like, of course I would come, like it was just the next logical step. But about a week before I was supposed to book my flight, she came to me with another problem. Her mother needed surgery. She showed me hospital documents, though they were all in Tagalog and I couldn't read them. She said it was going to cost 60,000 pesos and her family didn't have it. She wasn't asking directly again. She just told me about it. Said she was so stressed she couldn't focus at work, said she didn't know what to do. And then she said maybe I shouldn't come visit after all, because she needed to focus on her mother, and she didn't want to be distracted when we finally met. That hit me harder than I expected. I'd been counting down the days. I'd already looked at flights, hotels, imagined what it would be like to finally hold her hand. I sent her the money that same day, 1,200 Canadian dollars. She cried on the video call, said I was an angel, said her family was praying for me, that she couldn't wait to meet me and show me how grateful she was. 2 weeks later, I boarded a flight to Manila. Christina said she'd meet me at Clark International Airport, that she'd take a couple days off work, that she couldn't wait to finally be together. When I finally walked out of Clark International, the driver I'd arranged was holding a sign with my name, and the ride into Angeles was no more than 30 minutes. It was dark by then, and as soon as the taxi turned onto Fields Avenue, right into the area around Walking Street, I realized I was seeing something unlike anything back home. Neon lit up the road in every direction. Bars everywhere you looked. ABC Hotel was lit up. Kokomo's had music pouring out onto the street, and girls stood outside dozens of bars, rows of them smiling, waving, and calling out to men passing by. I'd known Christina worked in Angeles City, but she'd always told me she worked at a call center and lived in a quiet area. Seeing all this made me wonder for the first time what she'd been doing before we met. But when I got to my hotel and she was waiting in the lobby, all those thoughts disappeared. She was even more beautiful in person. She ran up and hugged me like we'd known each other for years, and for the first time in I don't know how long I felt wanted. We spent the first 2 days just being together. She took me around the city, showed me SM Clark, took me to restaurants, introduced me to a couple of her friends. Everything felt natural. She held my hand in public, kissed me on the cheek, acted like she was proud to be with me even though I was this 60-year-old guy and she was this stunning 28-year-old woman. On the third day, she took me to see where she lived. It was a small apartment in a not-so-great area. One room with a bathroom, concrete walls, barely any furniture. She was clearly embarrassed showing it to me. Said she knew it wasn't much, but it was all she could afford. That's when she first brought up the idea of us getting a place together. She said if I was serious about moving to the Philippines, it would make sense to get a nicer apartment. Something we could both live in, somewhere she could make a home for us. She'd been looking at condos in Angeles and found one that was about $30,000. It was a one-bedroom in a decent building with a pool and security. She said if we split it, it would only be $15,000 each, and then we'd have a place that was actually ours. But then she paused and said she didn't have $15,000, that she'd been sending everything to her family. I looked at it from every angle. I'd already spent about $2,000 on her at this point. I had $133,000 left. $30,000 for a condo in a decent building seemed reasonable, especially compared to prices back home. The problem was the foreign quota in that building had already been filled. As a foreigner, I wasn't allowed to own it in my name. My girlfriend said, "Buy it in my name, mister," which I probably shouldn't have done, but I did. I told myself we were together. We were building something, and what was hers was mine. I convinced myself that if I didn't do this, I'd lose her, and I couldn't go back to Edmonton alone after finally finding something real. I wired $30,000 to the developer through her account. We signed the papers at the sales office. Her name was on everything. I had nothing but her promise that it was ours together. For the first few months, everything seemed okay. We moved in together. She decorated the place, and I felt like I was finally living the life I'd imagined. I had a beautiful girlfriend, a nice condo, and I was spending about $2,000 a month on rent, food, and going out, which was way less than I'd spent in Canada. But I should have thought harder about what I'd just done. 6 months after we bought the condo, Christina said she wanted to start a small business. She'd been talking to her cousin who ran a food cart in Manila and was making decent money. She thought we could do the same in Angeles, maybe set up near one of the colleges or in a busy area. I wasn't excited about it, but she was relentless. She said it would give her something to do since she'd quit her call center job after I moved in. She said she wanted to contribute, didn't want to just depend on me for everything. She showed me a business plan she'd written up. Told me the cart would cost about $8,000, supplies and permits another $2,000, and we'd need a few thousand more as buffer for the first few months. Total investment $15,000. I looked at it and thought about how much I'd already spent. I was down to about $100,000 at this point. $15,000 more would put me at $85,000, and I was spending about $2,000 a month to live, which meant I had maybe 3 years of runway left. But she kept pushing. Every day it was the same conversation. "This is my chance," she'd say. "I want to build something for us. And then the guilt. When you're gone, I'll need something. You know I'll need to survive." Hearing that hit me in a way that I didn't want to admit. I was nearly 61. I had high blood pressure, and she was in her late 20s, still healthy and full of life, and she was going to outlive me by decades. Against everything in me telling me not to, I felt like I had no choice, and I let her have the money. I sold another $15,000 worth of the investments I had left back in Canada and transferred it to her account. She registered the business in her name, bought the equipment, hired someone to help her run it. For the first month, she was excited. She'd wake up early, go check on the cart, come home talking about how many customers they'd had. But by month 2, she was complaining. The location wasn't as good as she thought. The helper she'd hired was stealing. The supplies cost more than she'd budgeted. By month 3, she barely mentioned it. When I asked how it was going, she'd get defensive, say she was doing her best, that I didn't understand how hard it was. The cart eventually just sat there. The last time I saw it, it was locked up in storage, and she said the equipment was probably ruined by now. $15,000 gone. But the bigger problem was what came next. About 8 months into living together, her family requests started getting more aggressive. Before we were living together, it was maybe $200 a month, and I didn't mind. But now it was constant. Her brother needed money for school, $800. Her father needed a new motorcycle because his old one broke down, $1,200. Her sister's daughter needed surgery, $1,500. Every single time she'd come to me with the request, show me messages from her family, and wait for me to say yes. And every single time I thought about saying no, I'd see the look on her face and I'd cave. I wasn't sending them money because I believed the stories anymore. I was sending it because I didn't want to deal with her being upset, with her pulling away from me, with her going cold for days at a time. Within a year of moving to the Philippines, I'd spent $30,000 on the condo, $15,000 on the business, about $12,000 on family requests, $24,000 on living expenses. That was $81,000. I had $54,000 left. We lived in Angeles City for the most part. The condo was decent, the building had a pool, and the area was relatively safe. My routine was pretty simple. Wake up, have breakfast with Christina, maybe hit the gym in the building, and then just exist for the rest of the day. I wasn't working. I wasn't really doing anything productive. I was just living day to day, trying to make my money last, trying to keep Christina happy. Angeles City itself was an interesting place. During the day, it looked like any other Filipino city. Traffic, noise, people going about their business. But at night, especially around Fields Avenue and Walking Street, it transformed into something else entirely. Bars everywhere, girls everywhere, foreign men everywhere. I'd walk down Walking Street sometimes when Christina was out with friends, and I'd see guys my age, older even, sitting in bars with girls half their age. I'd wonder if I looked like them, if people saw me and Christina and thought the same thing. One thing I noticed very quickly being in the Philippines was how cheap everything was compared to Canada. A meal out was $3. A beer was $1. Rent on our place would have been maybe $500 a month if I was paying market rate, though I'd bought it outright, so we weren't paying rent at all. I tried to learn some Tagalog, picked up basic phrases, but never got very good at it. Christina spoke perfect English anyway, so there wasn't much need. I got to know her family a bit. Met her mother, her siblings, went to her province a couple times. They were nice enough to my face, always smiling, always welcoming, but I could tell they saw me as an ATM more than anything else. But underneath, I already knew I was caught in something I just couldn't pull myself out of. The money was draining faster than I'd planned. Christina was changing. She wasn't the same girl who'd sent me good morning messages every day and video called me for hours. She was comfortable now, and comfortable Christina was someone I didn't recognize. By the time we hit our 1-year anniversary of living together, I'd already spent $81,000. I had $54,000 remaining. My original plan was to spend maybe $1,500 a month and make my money last until my pension kicked in fully. But within a year of living in the Philippines, it was closer to $3,000 a month, and no matter how many times I looked at the figures, I couldn't explain where it was all going. I told myself $2,000 a month would be enough, but within 6 months of moving there, it was closer to $3,000. And no matter how many times I looked at the figures, I couldn't explain where it was all going. It was always something. Christina needed money for her nails, hair, beauty treatments every week. Her family constantly had emergencies that required $300 here, $500 there. We were eating out more than cooking because, she said she was too tired, her friends would invite us out, and somehow I always ended up paying for everyone. The condo fees were higher than I expected utilities, kept creeping up, and nights where I gave in when I didn't want to. Nights where she'd ask for money and I'd say no, and she'd get quiet, distant. Wouldn't talk to me for hours until I finally just handed her my card. One evening I sat her down and told her it couldn't go on like this, that the budget was $2,000 a month and there was no more. I tried to make it sound firm but fair, and I told her that if we wanted to have any kind of future together, we had to stick to it. She nodded and didn't argue, but I could tell she wasn't happy. Her face went cold. She didn't yell or cry. She just said, "Okay, Derek," in this flat voice that let me know she wasn't actually agreeing with me. Every request after that turned into an argument. Every peso questioned, and I found myself second-guessing whether I was the one being unreasonable. She'd say things like, "You have money, why are you being so cheap?" Or, "My family needs help and you don't care," or, "Other foreign men take care of their girlfriends better than you do." The guilt ate at me constantly. Things did change when we moved in together, in a way I wasn't expecting. Before we lived together, Christina never asked for anything from me beyond those first 2 requests. She was happy and content just being able to video call and talk about our future. But when we were living together, I could feel like she was more comfortable. But not comfortable in a positive way, comfortable in a negative way. She stopped doing the little things that made me feel special. No more good morning messages. No more asking about my day. No more cooking for me or suggesting we do things together. She started going out more with her friends, staying out later, being vague about where she'd been. When I'd ask, she'd get defensive, say I was being controlling, that she needed her own life. About 14 months into living together, Christina said she was going to visit her family in Pampanga, by herself. This was the first time she'd gone without me. She said her mother wasn't feeling well and she needed to help out for a few days. We had an agreement together that if one of us called the other, we had to pick up straight away. It was her rule, actually. She'd always been paranoid about me going out without her, always wanted to know where I was, who I was with. However, when she went to Pampanga by herself at that time, she was very difficult to contact. The first day I called her 3 times. No answer. I sent messages on WhatsApp. Delivered, but not read. Hours would go by before she'd respond with something like, "Sorry, was busy with Mum." The second day, same thing. I called in the morning, no answer. Called in the afternoon, no answer. Finally at night she called me back and said she'd accidentally left her phone in the house when they went out. The third day I called and she didn't answer again. When she finally messaged me, her excuse was that there was no battery on the phone because of an electric issue in her mother's house. The excuses kept coming. Going with her family somewhere and forgot her phone. No signal in the area because they went to a remote part. Phone died and couldn't find a charger. Was sleeping and didn't hear it ring. Every single excuse sounded reasonable on its own. But together they painted a picture I didn't want to see. When she came back, she was different. Distant. She wouldn't look at me the same way. She spent more time on her phone smiling at messages, turning the screen away when I walked by. 2 months later, she said she needed to go back to Pampanga again. Same story. Her mother needed help. I didn't want her to go, but I couldn't stop her. And the same pattern repeated. Couldn't reach her. Weak excuses. Came back acting strange. At this point, I'm definitely sure there is something going on. But I didn't know what to do about it. I felt like if I accused her, she'd just deny it and I'd look like the paranoid old man. If I did nothing, I'd keep getting disrespected in my own relationship. I chose to do nothing, and that was probably my biggest mistake. I wasn't looking at her the same way anymore. The trust was broken. Every time she touched her phone, I wondered who she was talking to. Every time she went out with friends, I wondered if she was really with friends. Every time she said she loved me, I wondered if she meant it or if she was just saying it to keep the money coming. I was quite friendly with one expat who was in a similar situation. His name was Barry. Australian guy, maybe 65, been living in Angeles for about 5 years. He was with a girl from one of the bars, much younger, and he seemed happy enough, but you could tell he knew the score. One day we were having beers at a sports bar, and I told him about buying the condo in Christina's name, about the business, about all the money I'd sent to her family. I remember him just shaking his head saying, "Mate, you know how this ends, right? She's got the condo, she's got your money, and you've got nothing if she decides to walk away tomorrow." I just didn't want to hear it, though. I made excuses. Told him Christina was different. Told him we had a real relationship. He just shrugged and said, "Hope you're right." By the time month 18 rolled around, I had about 46,000 left in the bank. I knew I couldn't keep burning through 3,000 a month anymore. I had maybe 15 months left before I'd be completely broke. I tried to sit Christina down and have a serious conversation, but she got defensive immediately. I told her we needed to cut back, that I was running out of money, that we needed a plan. She said I was exaggerating. Said I always complained about money, but I always had more. Said if I really loved her, I wouldn't be so worried about it. The conversation went nowhere. It only made things worse. She gave me the silent treatment for 3 days after that. I couldn't believe I'd let this happen. I was a grown man. I'd worked my whole life, saved everything I could, and here I was in a foreign country, broke and trapped with a woman who didn't respect me. About 20 months into our relationship, I had to go back to Canada for a few weeks. My daughter was getting married, and I couldn't miss it, even though I dreaded going back to the cold, dreaded facing my family and their judgment about Christina. Before I left, Christina was acting strange, overly affectionate, like she was performing. She kept saying she'd miss me so much that 2 weeks would feel like forever. that she couldn't wait for me to come back. I landed in Edmonton, went to the wedding, dealt with my daughter asking pointed questions about Christina and whether I was being smart with my money. I lied and said everything was fine. While I was in Canada, Christina's communication was sporadic. She'd message me once a day, maybe video call for 10 minutes, but she was always in a hurry, always had somewhere to be. One night, about 10 days into my trip, I called her at our usual time. No answer. I tried again an hour later. No answer. I sent messages. No response. I couldn't sleep that night. I had this gnawing feeling in my gut that something was very wrong. The next morning, I got a message from Barry, the Australian expat I'd become friends with. It said, "Mate, I need to tell you something. Saw Christina last night at Voodoo Lounge with some guy. Looked pretty cozy. Thought you should know." My hands were shaking reading that message. Voodoo Lounge was a bar on Walking Street. A girly bar, the kind of place where working girls took customers. I called Christina immediately. She answered this time, sounded groggy, said she'd just woken up. I asked her where she was last night. She said she was home watching TV, went to bed early. I asked her directly, "Were you at Voodoo Lounge?" There was silence. Long silence. Then she said, "Who told you that?" I said, "Just answer the question." She admitted she'd gone out with friends. Said it wasn't Voodoo Lounge. Said Barry must have been mistaken, that she was at a different bar nearby. I didn't believe her. I asked her to send me a picture of where she was right now. She said her phone camera wasn't working. Another excuse. That's when I decided I needed to know the truth. I messaged Barry and asked him to do me a favor. I asked if he could go by our condo and see if Christina was actually there. He said he was uncomfortable doing that, but I begged him. Told him I needed to know. He agreed. An hour later, he messaged me, "Your condo is empty, mate." Knocked on the door, no answer. Asked the security guard. He said he hasn't seen her in 2 days. My heart sank. I called her again. She answered, and I asked her flat out, "Where are you really?" She started crying. Said she'd been staying at her friend's place because our condo felt empty without me. Said she just needed company. I asked which friend. She gave me a name I'd never heard before. I asked if it was a male friend. She paused, then said yes. Everything clicked into place. The trips to Pampanga, the inability to contact her, the distance, the change in behavior. "How long?" I asked. She was silent. "How long, Christina?" She finally said, "I don't know what you want me to say." I said, "The truth. For once, just tell me the truth." She admitted she'd been seeing someone else. Said it started about 6 months ago. Said he was someone she'd known before me. Someone from her past who came back into her life. Said she tried to end it, but she couldn't. I asked if she loved him. She said she didn't know. I asked if she'd been with him while I was paying for everything, while I was sending money to her family, while I was buying her the condo and the business. She said yes. I asked if she ever loved me. She didn't answer. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I flew back to the Philippines 3 days later. Didn't tell Christina I was coming. I took a taxi straight from Clark Airport to our condo. When I got there, she wasn't home. I used my key to get in and started looking around. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I felt like I needed to see evidence with my own eyes. In her closet, hidden behind some clothes, I found a small notebook. I opened it and saw lists of numbers, dates, amounts. It was a record of money in, money out. One column had my name. Next to it, amounts and dates that matched exactly what I'd sent her over the past 20 months. Another column had a different name. I assumed it was him. Smaller amounts but frequent. At the bottom of the page, she'd written calculations. My running total was $93,000. His was about $12,000. She'd been playing both of us. I sat on the bed with that notebook in my hands and did the full accounting in my head. I had started with $135,000 when I moved to the Philippines. Itemized losses. Condo purchase $30,000, food cart business $15,000, family support 20 months $10,500, living expenses 20 months $35,000, miscellaneous requests $2,500 total spent $93,000. Had $42,000 left in my account. When the condo was eventually sold after everything fell apart, after all the fees and taxes, I got back about $8,000. I'd lost $85,000. I'd spent nearly 2 years of my life building what I thought was a future with someone, and $93,000 over and above what I should have been spending, all for someone who was living a double life the entire time. What a nightmare it was. The fact that she'd just been honest with me from the start about needing financial help, instead of pretending we had a real relationship, I'd have probably gone along with it. Maybe not to this extent, but I'd have helped her. But she went behind my back and basically stole my money for months while seeing someone else. Everything I'd paid for was in her name. Condo worth $30,000. Food cart equipment worth maybe $5,000 if you could even sell it. Everything else was just gone total value she kept. $35,000 of stuff I paid for. I had no claim over any of it, other than the fact it belonged to my girlfriend. But did I really want her to be my girlfriend now after what I'd learned? When Christina came home that evening, I was sitting on the couch with her notebook on the coffee table. She saw it immediately and froze in the doorway. "Derek, I can explain," she started. I held up my hand. "Don't," she tried anyway. Came over, sat down next to me, put her hand on my arm. I pulled away. She started crying, saying it wasn't what it looked like, that the notebook was old, that she wasn't seeing anyone else anymore, that she'd ended it, that she wanted to make things work with me. I just stared at her and asked, "Do you think I'm stupid?" She kept crying, kept trying to hug me, kept saying she was sorry, but her apologies meant nothing. They were just more words from someone who'd been lying to me for months. I told her it was over. She could keep the condo. I didn't care anymore, but I was done. She shifted from apologetic to angry almost instantly. Started yelling at me, saying I was overreacting, that all men in the Philippines supported their girlfriends, that I'd known what I was getting into, that I couldn't just leave her with nothing. I reminded her she wasn't leaving with nothing. She had a $30,000 condo I'd bought her. She said it wasn't enough. Said she'd given me 2 years of her life. Said I owed her for that. The entitlement was stunning. Over the next week, I stayed in a cheap hotel near Clark. She kept calling, kept messaging, oscillating between apologizing and demanding I help her more before I left. I blocked her number eventually. My idea was to get back to Canada as quickly as possible, cut my losses, and try to figure out what the hell I was going to do with $42,000 and no plan. About 2 weeks after I moved out, she showed up at the hotel. I don't know how she found me. She was crying, saying she'd made a mistake, that she loved me, that the other guy meant nothing. I asked her how long she'd been seeing him. She finally admitted it was almost a year. I asked her if she'd been with him in our bed. She didn't answer. That was all I needed to know. I told her to leave. When she knew I was serious, she finally left and I never saw her again. The flight back to Edmonton felt like punishment. Not for the money I'd lost, but for all the time I'd wasted convincing myself everything was real. Back in Edmonton, I had no choice but to start over from the bottom. I'd sold my house before moving to the Philippines, and I couldn't afford to buy another one now. I rented a small one-bedroom apartment in a part of town I used to look down on. I was 62 years old, had $42,000 to my name, and a pension that wouldn't kick in fully for another few years. My current pension payment was about $1,500 a month, which barely covered rent and food. I had to go back to work. Found a part-time job doing project management consulting, which paid okay but wasn't nearly what I used to make. I was working again at 62, when I'd planned to be retired and comfortable. The anger has never left me, and the bitterness stayed in everything I did. And all I could think was that I traded away the last chance I had for something that was never real in the first place. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was the humiliation. My daughter had been right. Barry had been right. Everyone who'd warned me had been right, and I'd ignored all of them because I wanted so badly to believe I'd found something real. I always think back to what I did, and the time I had there with her, and if only she'd been honest from the start. If only I'd seen the signs earlier. If only I'd listened to the warnings, things would have turned out like they should have done, and I hate her for it. I hate myself more, but I hate the fact that she wasted 2 years of my life and nearly $100,000 without any remorse. She knew exactly what she was doing from the very beginning. If I could do it over, I would do everything differently. Never put property in someone else's name. I don't care if you're married. I don't care if you trust them completely. If you can't own it legally, don't buy it. Set firm financial boundaries from day one. Decide what you're willing to spend and stick to it no matter what. The moment you start making exceptions, you're finished. Listen when people warn you. Your family, your friends, other expats who've been there longer than you, they're not trying to ruin your happiness. They're trying to save you from yourself. Don't ignore red flags. If she can't be reached, if the excuses don't add up, if her behavior changes, trust your gut. You're not being paranoid, you're being realistic. Keep emergency money separate. Have an account she doesn't know about with enough to get home if everything falls apart. Because it might. I'm older now. I'm still working, and I'm still living in the same city I tried to escape. I rent instead of own. I have about $50,000 now after working for a year, but that's still nowhere near where I should be at my age. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. The financial loss hurt, but the emotional damage hurt more. Knowing someone could look you in the eye, say they love you, and be planning how to take everything from you the entire time. The fact that I still have enough to live on and didn't end up completely homeless, that's got to be good enough for me. I know guys who lost everything, who borrowed money they couldn't pay back, who destroyed their entire lives. At least I can still recover from this. I'm still living in Edmonton. I'm in a small apartment in the north side, 1 bedroom, nothing special. It's cold, it's boring, and it's exactly where I was trying to get away from. My current financial situation: savings $51,000, up from $42,000 when I returned. Monthly income $2,800, $1,502 pension, plus $300 part-time work. Property owned, nothing debt, none. Thank God I started with $135,000, which would have given me about $4,500 a month to live on if I'd just invested it properly and stayed in Canada. But I don't think you can look back at things and wonder too hard, what would have been if I did things differently? It'll drive you insane. My daily life now is pretty quiet. I work 3 days a week doing consulting. The rest of the time I just exist. I don't go out much. Don't really have friends anymore. My daughter and I talk occasionally, but there's always this unspoken "I told you so" hanging over every conversation. I do know now that Christina, she is still my girlfriend on paper, technically, since we never officially broke up and I never pursued anything legally, is still living in Angeles City. I heard through Barry that she's with the guy she was seeing behind my back. They're living in the condo I bought her. She would have been in a lot better position if she'd just been honest from the start, but she wasn't, and therefore she's not any better off in the long run, because now she has a reputation among expats in Angeles as a scammer. The Philippines itself is a beautiful country, and I'm sure, in fact, I'm guaranteed that there are real and genuine people there, and there are genuine relationships between foreigners and Filipinos. But there are also people like her who see foreign men as walking ATMs and nothing more. I'm not saying everybody's like that. In fact, I know most people aren't. But there are enough of them that you need to be careful. Way more careful than I was. I'm telling this story because I want other people out there, other guys out there, to know what can happen. How easy it could be to lose so much money when you think with, let's just call it, your heart instead of your head. I didn't think I was naive. I was a grown man in his 60s. I thought I knew better, but I got played right from the start, just as easily as anyone else. Red flags I should have seen. She was willing to date a man 32 years older than her. She needed money within the first month of talking. Every time I set a boundary, there was an emergency that required me to break it. She always had an excuse. When I couldn't reach her behavior changed completely after I committed financially. Everything had to be in her name. If you see any of these things happening in your relationship, walk away. I don't care how beautiful she is. I don't care how much she says she loves you. Protect yourself first. Don't buy property in her name. Don't fund businesses in her name. And most importantly, don't send money before you've even met in person. That's the biggest red flag of all. And I ignored it because I was lonely and desperate. 20 months ago, I thought I was building an empire in the Philippines. I thought I'd found a beautiful young woman who loved me for who I was, not what I had. 20 months later, I'm back where I started. Except now I'm $90,000 poorer and way more bitter. I've seen so many people since I got back come back from the Philippines, with all the best intentions in the world, completely devastated and broke. And they're the ones who have to rebuild their entire lives from scratch in their 60s and 70s. The fact that I still have some money left and didn't lose absolutely everything, That's got to be good enough for me. I know guys who mortgaged their houses, who borrowed from family, who destroyed every relationship they had for a woman who was using them the entire time. The Philippines was the country that I always dreamed about visiting. It was a country I wanted to retire in and live out my final years in comfort and warmth. I thought I'd found someone to share that dream with. I quickly realized that I was just another old foreign man with money, and that's all I ever was to her. Even after all that happened, I can't say I regret trying. I regret how it happened. I regret trusting too much. But I don't regret wanting something better than what I had. Christina is probably still living in that condo, still seeing that guy, probably looking for the next foreigner to help pay for whatever she wants next. And that's fine. That's her life, but it's not mine anymore. I thought I was building a future in Angeles City before learning the truth. But the truth was that I was just funding someone else's future while mine fell apart. And by the time I realized it, I'd already sent $100,000 before learning that none of it was real. Just make better decisions if you want to do the same. You have been warned.